Phone check. 1, 2. The microphone check. 1, 2, 1, 2. The microphone check. I got my headphones tuned between two different AM stations, and my briefcase is full of declassified information. Declassified. Declassified.
Good evening and welcome to News from Neptune for the 12th of October in the 41st week of 2012. For more than 20 years, our program has been a spontaneous and unrehearsed discussion of the news of the week and its coverage by the media. First on a so-called community radio station, and when censored and locked out of there, welcomed, I'm happy to say, by the good folks at Urbana Public Television. I'm Carl Estabrook. My discussants tonight are David Green and Ron Szoke. We'll take turns suggesting an item from the week's news that's been ignored or misrepresented, sometimes even innocently, and then giving the others a chance to comment on it. Our program's name, News from Neptune, was chosen to honor Noam Chomsky, who has said that, he's also been talking sense about American politics for more than twice the 20 years we've been on the air, but he has said that in the American media, either you repeat the same conventional doctrines everybody is saying, or else you say something true, and it will sound like it's from Neptune. Today is October 12th, when the Norwegian politicians who award the Nobel Peace Prize gave it to the newly elected Barack Obama as he was arranging to increase the killing in Afghanistan by tripling the size of the U.S. invasion. People were reminded of the political satirist Tom Lehrer, who said, quote, "Political satire became obsolete when Henry Kissinger was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Everything is so weird in politics that it's very hard to be funny about it," close quote, said Tom Lehrer, who did manage to be very funny about it for a long time. Now, he was talking about the situation 40 years ago when Kissinger was given the Peace Prize for, believe it or not, ending the Vietnam War. Well, the Norwegian hacks have outdone themselves and given the prize this morning to the European Union. Now, several people pointed out the prize is supposed to go to individuals, and so 500 million Europeans, I suppose, are considered the recipients of this particular prize, but in fact they mean, of course, the political structure, the European Union, while that union continues to support Obama's Mideast war and carry on economic war against its own people. An austerity program. Austerity is a confiscation of people's standard of living. An austerity program that threatens to produce fascism, as in the 1930s. And remember that austerity, under the name of deficit reduction, is also the program of both Obama and Romney. It makes little difference to the 1%, because in America, the murderous policies of our rulers are not affected by elections. In the Metamorphoses, a principal source for Shakespeare, translated in fact by the young Edward de Vere, the standard English translation of the 16th century goes under the name of his uncle, but it was probably he who did it. In the Metamorphoses, the poet Ovid tells the story of Europa, abducted by the king of the gods in the shape of a white bull. Perhaps a classical allegory for this morning's Peace Prize. So you're watching News from Neptune, the White Bull edition, and Ron Szoke will grasp the first horns.
Okay. I want to take a little hop, skip, and jump through several items in the news today and the past few days, starting with the curiously ambiguous reaction to the award of the Literature Prize to China's Mo Yan, who seems to have fallen down on his duty to make anti-communist and anti-Chinese statements. In the New York Times, London, Mo Yan, a wildly prolific and internationally renowned Chinese author who considered himself non-political, but who's embraced by the ruling Communist Party, has drawn criticism from dissident writers, was on Thursday awarded the 2012 Nobel Prize in Literature. In his novels and short stories, Mr. Mo paints sprawling, intricate portraits of Chinese rural life, often using flights of fancy animal narrators, the underworld elements, fairy tales that invoke the techniques of South American magical realists. His work has been widely translated and is readily available in the West, but he is perhaps best known abroad for Red Sorghum of 1987, published in English in 1993, which takes on issues like the Japanese occupation, bandit culture, and the harsh lives of rural Chinese, and which in 1987 was made into a movie directed by Zhang Yimou. Okay, the problem here seems to be that he's not sufficiently anti-communist, and so the news writers are having a problem with him. It's obviously his duty as a recognized writer to start saying anti-Chinese things, anti-communist, make those statements, and he has become known, because he has hesitated to do that, as not as a dissident, but there's suggestion that he's kind of a coward and an opportunist, because he has, according to some commentators, discerned where the limits of allowable statements are, and stayed well within them. Indeed, he has an official position in the Chinese Writers Union. So it's his duty to become a dissident and a saint or hero in Western eyes, but he has fallen down on that duty, and so there's these suggestions that he's too timid, and he, again, has not done his duty because he is not sufficiently anti-communist. We learned, actually last week, of two historians who, very prominent, eminent historians who died, Eugene Genovese and Eric Hobsbawm. The article in The Atlantic by Benjamin Schwartz has a very high estimate of Genovese in particular. Also mentions favorably Hobsbawm, who remained a Marxist historian all of his life. But Genovese, apparently late in life, shifted very much to the right, and we find in the Weekly Standard a tribute to Genovese. It's unsurprising then, they say, that after looking at his philosophy of history, apparently, that the greatest Marxist scholar of his generation ended his life as a traditionalist Catholic who believed in the importance of faith for creating a humane society. So a clue in the direction in which he was evolving can be found in an essay Genovese wrote in the 1990s, in which, still as a Marxist, he complained, for the political left, there's an especially dark side to the question of ideological bias and its attendant contempt for religion. And there's also an article, well, this was from the Weekly Standard, in another conservative or right-wing publication, the National Review, of November 14th of last year, Up from Leftism by Jay Nordlinger. It takes the same line, congratulating him on having repudiated leftism and Marxism and so on. So this raises, again, the question of how do we find any history which is untainted by ideology and some propagandistic impulse. And the old question then arises in my mind, can history be objective? Can it be scientific? So I'll be asking my colleagues here to weigh in on that. Again, last week we endured another Columbus Day, a kind of semi-holiday. You never know what's going to be open or closed or happening, and so on. The annual Columbus Day Freakout, I call it. Columbus has gone, in the eyes of many, from being a great national hero to being an enormous villain. There's been a reaction against him in the circles that I'm familiar with. So in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, as every school child apparently learns. But the later reaction, which I think has been overdone in some quarters, is interesting, stressing what a big villain he has been. So you'll find in books like Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States, which is not all that extreme, and James Lowen's Lies My Teacher Told Me, the other side of the story, and limiting somewhat the supposed heroism of Christopher Columbus, and stressing that he was as infected by the lust for gold as the Spaniards were later, and he did a lot of very unsavory things. So again, how do we find a objective point of view on these things? I'm not sure. It emerged again last night concerning the vice presidential debate between Joe Biden and Paul Ryan. Who won and who lost? Note the assumption that there has to be a winner and a loser, which I think is kind of childish. But
Prizes
anyway,
for everybody, said Alan.
Yeah. But the responses were very predictable in view of people's prior political orientations. The conservatives, right-wingers, complaining about Biden's smile and clowning around and so on, and praising Paul Ryan for his grasp of the issues and statistics and so on. Whereas from the liberal leftist point of view, it was all the other way around. So again, can history be objective? Can it be scientific? Well, it can be in some greater or lesser degree, I suppose. Balanced and judicious, but I'm very skeptical about the possibility of a objective scientific history. How could we tell? The only available criterion would be whether it harmonizes with our own political and convictions and biases, it seems. So there it is, gentlemen.
Your radical skepticism bothers me, as you know.
Yes.
Ron, David, you got a take on objectivity of history?
I don't know. You got to ask harder questions, Ron.
Yes, well put.
You know, all I would say about that is that I've read Hobsbawm and his trilogy, and it's worth reading. The Age of Revolution, the Age of Empire, and or the Age of Industry, the Age of Capital, and the Age of Empire. And there are wonderful ways to get what I think is an informed overview of the broader developments, the broader economic and political developments from late 18th century Europe through 20th century Europe, with the kind of Eurocentric point of view, which of course would have to change, and it was changing certainly by the time he wrote his book, The Age of Extremes, which deals with the 20th century. I guess the first thing I would say is that you wouldn't necessarily know by reading Hobsbawm's books that he was a Marxist historian. He relates economics to politics in a coherent way. From what I recall, it's been years since I read them, but I found them a very good way to begin to develop a sort of more informed structural understanding of how capitalism evolved in Europe and as a kind of global force. Along with historians like that, I would place, in terms of both perhaps a difficult style of writing, a it isn't easy going because he's operating at a relatively abstract level, uses a lot of data. I don't think he overwhelms with data. I think he keeps a narrative flow going. Somebody who is a tougher go, sort of as a historian of his magnitude, would be Emanuel Wallerstein, and perhaps Gabriel Coco, all of whom I think, operating from a kind of Marxist-informed historical view, help us to understand some of the more profound currents that lead us to a greater understanding of, say, what's been going on since World War II.
Yeah. There have been some notices about Hobsbawm in the right-wing press, and the only thing they have to say is that he was a communist at some point in his life and remained soft on communism and refused to repudiate his past. And again, the complaint was that he was not sufficiently anti-communist.
I would tie your first theme to your last theme in the sense that who talks about communist China anymore? Who describes it that way? Yeah. We understand well now that who talks about communist Russia or the communist Soviet Union. Yeah. We talk, I think, what Chomsky and other people argue is that what we're dealing with here in both the former Soviet Union and China, and now current Russia and China, is a kind of a state-controlled form of capitalism, and what we're dealing with in our own country is a related form. Yes. All these governmental economic forms rely on a certain kind of central planning in a way that isn't just a kind of slogan, and so in the same way I would say with Hobsbawm, it's like at least separate his historical writing from his political identification as a Marxist or a member of the Communist Party. I think they're pretty much two different things.
Sure.
And state capitalism here, I mean, and that's worth talking about because it will force us to do some of the necessary spade work to figure out what we mean when we say capitalism, and we do indeed use the term a lot and ways that are often confused, and that makes a good deal of sense to try to sort that out. But there is another way to talk about this, and that is the way that David Harvey chose when he wrote his Neoliberalism, A Brief Introduction. He pointed out the transition of both East Asia and Western Europe, including North America, in the after the golden age of capitalism. The golden age of capitalism, usually considered to be the generation after the Second World War, ending sometime in the 1970s. But the transition from the 1970s to the present, in both East Asia and in the West, as we say, actually can be subsumed under a similar description, which he called neoliberalism, and that the transformations of both political economies were transformations in the direction of neoliberalism. So we might reasonably ask, what is neoliberalism? A brief study by two, not brief at all, a detailed study by two recent French scholars has argued that neoliberalism has been less an ideological program on behalf of free markets, which is the way it's normally presented, than a, quote, quest for high income on the part of the upper classes, close quote. That is, the 1% strike back in both China and the U.S. in the years since the 1970s, and that this Chomsky, for example, points to the book by the Trilateral Commission, representatives from, in that case, East Asian, Japanese capitalism, American capitalism, and European capitalism, that appeared in 1975 under the title of The Crisis of Democracy. And there was a crisis of democracy in the eyes of these people. The crisis was that there was too damn much democracy around. The people were getting excited about this idea of democracy and thinking it might be a good idea to try it. and that the end of the golden age of capitalism had led on to people thinking that, yeah, indeed, they should try to run their societies, and where politics was not just a matter between choosing between Tweedledum and Tweedledummer, as we saw on the television last night, that politics was actually a matter of choosing policies, economic as well as what we narrowly call political policies, on the basis of consultation of the whole community. In other words, democracy. In fact, that had to be stopped. That was what the elites in both Asia and America, and in the West and Asia, decided we couldn't have. That was just too dangerous to the prosperity of what we now call the 1%. And that politics in the last generation has been a conscious construction of a neoliberal order under that description. In the United States, that's taken the form of a financialization of the economy and the offshoring of production. Send jobs abroad because we can hire workers cheaper there, turn the economy into a matter of buying and selling paper rather than actually making things. Now, that's brought us to the pass that we're in right now, and it's not a pretty one. And it's the notion that this is somehow a political and economic millennium seems to me a very dangerous notion indeed. And that relates, it seems to me, to your question of the objectivity of history, Ron. What we've got to do is describe the situation accurately. The question is not, can history be objective? The question is, can it be accurate? The description that we've got of the Cold War from our political leaders on both sides, once again, we might say, around the world, has been a matter of fantasy, a matter of propaganda, a matter of manufacturing consent to a story which is not innocent, a story that redounds to the profit, literally and figuratively, of the ruling class. Now, what history can do, and Noam Chomsky is perhaps one of the best practitioners of this sort of history, what history can do is break through this propaganda. It's not a question of making history balanced between a right-wing view and a left-wing view so that we have we have a balanced account. We don't want a balanced account at all. We want an accurate account. Can history be accurate? Yes, tell the truth. Should it be? Of course it should. But the notion that, well, what we have to do is get somewhere in the middle between, not too far left, not too far right, that's just silly. So objectivity is not the issue.
Oh, okay. Well, it's been a big issue for a whole lot of historians for a long time. But
what that shows is the corruption of the history.
That noble dream of historical objectivity or scientific history and so on has inspired a number of historians for some time, and others like Carl Becker, of course, mocked it, and so on. But thanks for correcting them all, Carl.
Noam Chomsky tells a story, as a matter of fact, about that. He said when he started his original work on linguistics, he had to learn some mathematics. He didn't have any professional training in mathematics, and the Chomskyan linguistics depends upon mathematical notions, particularly recursion and so forth. He had to go out and learn that. And so he went, talked to some mathematicians, learned some math and so forth, and wrote about it in connection with language. He said, about the same time or shortly afterwards, he started writing about politics and started writing about history, including the background of the Pacific War, that is, what the U.S. participation in the Second World War and so forth. And he said it was in those days when he talked to mathematicians, they wanted to know whether he had got the right answer or not. When he talked to historians about his political writings, they wanted to know where he'd gotten his degree in history. And that brings us back to your man Genovese, who is an interesting example of that. I knew Gene pretty well, actually. We taught together. I was a junior member of the faculty of at the University of Rochester when he and Christopher Lash, another important Marxist, secundum quid, historian, were the shining lights of the department. In fact, I knew both of them fairly well. His wife, Betsy, had been a graduate student with me, and well, as I say, we were part of this milieu at the University of Rochester. But look, Genovese was a very strange fellow. I mean, here again, he should be evaluated not on whether he was a leftist or a Catholic or a rightist or anything else. The question is, did he get the right answer? Did he describe the slave South accurately? That's the point. Not whether it was a communist account or a Catholic account or something else. And there are reasonable questions about that, and the serious historians wanted to get into that with him. Gene's own views, his own political views, are characterized as having swung to the right. It's not quite accurate. What Gene did was speak for the tradition in American literature called the Southern Agrarian that was always profoundly critical of liberal capitalism and the culture of liberal capitalism. He was critical of the culture of liberal capitalism when he was a communist, when he was a member of the Communist Party, which he left at a very young age. He was thrown out for being a hothead. Some other extreme. That was not the issue. As a historian, did he describe the slave South correctly?
How can you tell whether something historical era has been described correctly? Where's the template that you compare it with to judge whether it's accurate or not?
You examine the evidence. You go look at the evidence that's been adduced, and you try to figure out whether that supports the account that's being given. I mean, this...
the evidence is always incomplete and ambiguous.
Yes, that's true. Most of our evidence in the world is incomplete and ambiguous. Yes. Therefore, it takes some effort to try to understand what the case is. And if we get it wrong, we hope that someone will tell us that we got it wrong, and that we'll try to do a better job of getting it. Not of finding something that fits someone's ideological view.
Well, let me just say that, I agree that, if you ask whether history can be objective in the best sense of the word or in a fair sense of the word, that's true. It's just the problem is that the word objective has come to mean sort of within the context of science and social science, something that could only be done by disinterested observers. And I think
people who'd gotten degrees in the right place.
Right.
Yeah.
And given the social science in this country anyway, meaning non-Marxist related social science and sort of quantitative social science and sort of behavioral social science, has developed pretenses. In some ways, it can tell us some things about how people behave, certainly. But at a broader social level, it's developed pretenses towards understanding the world as a kind in this kind of functional way that sort of always tends to at bottom, implicitly or explicitly, affirm the triumph of capitalism in history. That capitalism is where history goes and is the way history will play itself out in a kind of positive way. So the trick is, or just not the trick, the approach is to understand objectivity, if you want to use that word, in a broader way in terms of understanding what the effects of capitalism have really been, how it actually works. And I think that social science or disciplined, rational, evidence-oriented ways of thinking with theory used in an appropriate way are good ways to understand the way society and history work. It's just that the word, I think Glenn Greenwald talks this morning about the debate last night, and Martha Raddatz, the debate moderator's claim as a journalist to exercising journalistic objectivity, and what Greenwald criticizes about that in one of his columns. I think there's 2 columns out there that he wrote after last night, or at least 2 comments that he wrote. And the claim in politics and in journalism, the claim to objectivity has come to mean bipartisanship or lack of partisanship. And that's not the meaning that we should use in terms of history writing or any other any other approach.
It's
a
worse
broader
than
approach.
it's worse than a blunder. It's a crime, because what you do when you do that is you cover sin with smooth names, and that you give an account of, say, the Mideast war that says the U.S. is trying to stop terrorism, rather than the U.S. is exercising an imperial control over the Middle East. Now, one of those statements is accurate, one of those statements isn't accurate, and it makes a difference which you say, and balancing somewhere in between them is nonsense.
Yeah, well, I think, again, we are papering over a lot of difficulties here with smooth-sounding terms. Is that in the Bible, by the way, Carl?
What's that?
Covering sin with smooth names?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't think it is. I think it's actually in a missal. But
It's in a what?
A Catholic missal somewhere. That's the source of it, as far as I know.
You'd like me to be accurate in my quotation,
Yes,
in other words,
yes,
right?
right,
Okay,
right,
yeah.
right.
Well, a reasonable request. We'll see what we can do.
Yeah, yeah.
You're watching News from Neptune.
Yeah.
I point out, by the way, that you began with what seemed to me a curiously positive account of Mo Yan, the Chinese writer who was given a Nobel Prize. I haven't read anything by Mo Yan, and I'm interested that none of the accounts that I saw seem to mention what, in fact, is his best-known book, even according to the Nobel Committee. The title of it translates as Big Breasts and Wide Hips. So, I mean, you know,
They prefer to talk about red sorghum, right?
well, that's right. They try to find a little slightly more neutral title to praise him for. And also, I've only seen one mention of the fact that in Chinese, and my Chinese limps substantially, in Chinese, the phrase Mo Yan means don't speak.
Yeah.
It's a pen name, like Mark Twain or something. But in this case, the author, who goes by the name Mo Yan, claims that this is what his family told him whenever he started to talk about social or political matters in the China of his youth. So he became the writer Don't Speak. And Don't Speak was given the Nobel Prize in Literature this last week. You're watching News from Neptune. We will press on. David Green has an axe to grind, I think.
Yeah.
I lost the metaphor.
The axe to grind. Well, first of all, none of us around the table won the Nobel Peace Prize. And
we were, in fact, the head of Urbana Public Television commiserated with us just before we went on the air, saying once again we were overlooked this year, and he said that was too bad.
And not only that, none of us have been awarded a MacArthur Genius Grant, which were announced within the last week or two.
Really?
And unless they haven't told one of us yet.
Yeah, well, it's a
or
terrible
one
injustice,
of us is
right.
keeping it a secret. But one of the people that was awarded a MacArthur Genius Grant is a Harvard economist named Raj Chetty, who was one of the youngest person to have ever been tenured, apparently, in the Harvard economics faculty. Whether that's a good thing or not, I don't know. You know, Alan Dershowitz always claims to be the youngest person to have been tenured by the Harvard Law School. What brings me to a discussion of Professor Chetty is the fact that what we see, say in the local newspaper, if you opened it up last Sunday, relentless attack on school teachers by one columnist and one editor. Maybe attack is a little bit of a strong word, but a rather jaundiced view towards the contribution that teachers make towards educating their children and the need for disciplining teachers to the point of firing them if they don't educate our children in the proper sort of test-oriented way that those in Chicago apparently are not doing, or even those down here are apparently not doing, maybe not doing enough to satisfy some of the local people. Raj Chetty was involved. I did a little sort of his name. I didn't quite know who he was. I was curious. And I found that he'd been involved in a fairly notable, well-reported study showing the value added of teaching, an economic study applied to the ultimate earnings of students who have certain teachers. He basically sorted out the good teachers from the bad teachers by using one of these massive data, sort of retrospective data studies, to come up with the fact that according to one of the co-authors of this study in regards to teachers is the message is to fire people, meaning teachers, sooner rather than later. And even though I don't usually read stuff, there's a wonderful piece on, there was a wonderful piece in response to this past January on a website or a blog called The All, A-W-L, theall.com, by a woman named Maria Bustillos. And I'm going to quote a few choice comments from her regarding this study. What she says is, Professor Chetty acknowledged, of course there are going to be mistakes. Teachers who get fired do not deserve to get fired. But he said that using value-added sources would lead to fewer mistakes, not more. And then Maria Bustillos goes on, that is easy for Professor Chetty to say. He's 32 years old and some kind of wunderkind. This was before he got the MacArthur Genius Grant, who is apparently very comfortable dictating the fates of lesser souls. I can't help but think that someone with just a little more imagination would have recommended instead, if these claims are true, that it might be a good idea to find exactly how the better, quote-unquote, teachers achieve their results, and then teach those techniques to everybody else. But no, they want to fire people sooner rather than later. And she goes on, I would just love to know how Chetty, Friedman, and Rockoff, she's referring to the three co-authors of this study, which was well reported on in the New York Times. It's not some obscure academic study. Once they discovered this, the mainstream media ran with it, at least for a day or two. I would just love to know how Chetty, Friedman, and Rockoff would like it if economists, too, had to be standardized tested and stood to lose their jobs every year if their recommendations didn't result in a measurable increase in GDP, or if their predictions were off by 0.5%. Would we have even one economist left? Keynes, maybe. Oh, whoops, he's dead. She goes on. And the point I would like to make about a study like this is that not only is it absurd on the face of it, I don't think I'm using the word too strongly, the assumptions underlying these studies, which isn't even questioned in this good article, are that if you show that people can make more money by having better teachers, it doesn't mean that if everybody did well at school, they would be making more money. It doesn't address any fundamental economic structural issues about jobs and how jobs work and how our economy works. Anyway, she goes on and says, whether even a large increase in income is a legitimate indicator of a successful life is a question that is going to have to wait another day, because there is so much wrong with this study and the response to it that there isn't a hope of getting to the real philosophical underpinnings of educating young people, the part we ought to be thinking about and talking about. But let's get a few things out of the way, she goes on, just for context. I'm an ordinary parent, and I do not give 0.5% of a tinker's curse whether my kid earns an extra $250 a year or not, which is what this study showed, that you could earn an extra $250 a year, blah, blah, blah. I know many parents who feel as I do about this. What we want for our kids is for them to grow up to be adults who are happy, well-informed, engaged citizens, love their work and be good at it, have a lot of pleasure and love in their lives, eyes open, good friends, and good companions. Responsible, kind, reliable, open-minded people, good parents themselves, maybe someday. If anyone is going to be envisioning education reforms, then let them reckon with these principles first. It is a real disgrace that this NBER, it's a study that was funded by the Bureau of Economic Research, which does do a lot of good stuff, but this NBER study should have been quoted so widely and so approvingly, particularly when we already have some rock-solid indications of what should be done instead. And again, the point I would reiterate, and that I make in a hopefully upcoming newspaper article, if they choose to print it, is that we need to separate whatever our discussions of educational philosophy, achievement, and so forth. We need to separate our discussions of school reform from broader economic reform, because good students aren't going to invent good jobs. I don't understand what it is that people don't understand about the fact that there are no jobs for people who are highly qualified for various things. And I don't understand what all this constant hysteria and panic and concern is about the fact that we're not training people for jobs. Every day you go out, people that have jobs are doing those jobs. Everywhere you go, everyone you see, people are just doing their jobs. I go to work, people are doing their jobs. I go shopping, I go to the doctor, people are doing their jobs. What is this constant concern about not having people doing jobs? The question is, there aren't the jobs, and that amazingly, when there are the jobs, people do two things. They go to school to learn how to do those jobs, but more important, they get the jobs, and then they learn the jobs. In the real world, you get a job, and then you learn the job.
Thank you, David. Can we give a balanced account for the amongst the economists, Ron?
Well, there are some assumptions, I think, lurking in what you said. One of them being that the main function or principal function of educational institutions is vocational training, which I view as a relatively minor and secondary view of what education is about.
This is an important point.
Yeah, but anyway, that's considered an old-fashioned elitist point of view in many quarters today, and there is a more and more open and frank acknowledgement that what education should be about from kindergarten through graduate school is vocational training and training people for jobs. And there are certain obvious difficulties with that. One of the most obvious ones being, as many people have pointed out, that whatever you learn in the name of practical job skills, vocational training today will be obsolete in most cases 5 years from now. And except for basic skills that you don't learn typically in vocational training classes concerning verbal ability and mathematical and statistical and computer skills and so on. But it's a difficult area, and we've retreated, I think, into the notion that the nostrum to fix the system is to fire teachers. And if we're still having problems, it's because we haven't fired enough teachers yet. And I think this is completely wrong. It ducks the problem, but the real problem, of course, is the class bias in education, and we will be told, well, we can't do anything about that. What we can do is start firing teachers. And
in a sense, they're right, because
yes.
As long as we have social classes, there's
Yes.
always going to be class bias.
Yes.
So we might as well just, at the very start, go ahead and get rid of the social classes.
All right, right.
Dismissed,
Yeah.
so to speak.
So what interests me is the resurgence of the idea of industrial engineering in education, which has appeared and reappeared a number of times by people who want to be practical. Education, schools, colleges should be run like a business, is their recurrent cry, and it never really works. It distorts education horribly, it seems to me, but people keep returning to that because apparently of the enormous cultural prestige that business and the corporation have in our society. Everyone wants to be like a corporate executive, and except for a few of us who are kind of regressive. But yeah, I just picked up another book about Frederick Taylor the other day, and noticed again and again that there are these attempts to apply cost-benefit analysis, input-output analysis, systematic scientific methods, and so on to education. It's been tried again and again and again over the decades and generations.
Well,
and again, it's always been found wanting in the end.
But it can still get you MacArthur Genius Grant.
Yes, right.
doesn't speak well of the MacArthur Genius Grants if what you need is something
I'm not
as
saying
crass
that's
as
the
that.
only thing this guy did,
Yeah.
but
Well,
anyway.
It's amazing. I look forward to your article, David, because I'm appalled at the crassness of the argument, and it further lowers my opinion of the Harvard Economics Department, which for many years has not been very high. That they decide that this is the sort of thing they want their young people to be doing. Here's something that was written about the time young Mr. Chitty was born, as near as I can figure. You said he was, what is he?
30, I think he's 32 now or something.
This is more than 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Written by an American engineer and education figure in education. In fact, you guys could probably guess who it is. Quote, "We must do away with the absolutely specious notion that everybody has to earn a living. It is a fact today that 1 in 10,000 of us can make a technological breakthrough capable of supporting all the rest. The youth of today are absolutely right in recognizing this nonsense of earning a living. We keep inventing jobs because of this false idea that everybody has to be employed at some kind of drudgery, because according to Malthusian Darwinian theory, he must justify his right to exist. So we have inspectors of inspectors and people making instruments for inspectors to inspect inspectors. The true business of people should be to go back to school and think about whatever it was they were thinking about before somebody came along and told them they had to earn a living." Close quote. Guess of the author?
It doesn't,
1970, yes.
Paul Goodman?
Not bad, close.
No,
Close.
well, my guesses would be Jeremy Rifkin has been saying things like that for some time. I view him as a kind of prophet of our time. Maybe Ivan Illich, but who knows?
Illich is also a good guess, I think. Rifkin, Rifkin was taken apart by that piece of Perry Anderson's I sent around, and I think he probably deserves that. But no, that was Buckminster Fuller writing in 1970, in the midst of the 60s. The 60s, after all, weren't over until well into the 70s, remember, about these questions. And it seems to me to make a great deal of sense, as most of what Bucky had to say all those years ago on ecology and other issues much of what he had to say makes sense. After spending many years kicking around universities and often being fired for reasons that I'm sure improved the net earning capacity of my students, the conclusion I must admit I came to as a retired teacher is that most of our higher education would be much better substituted for with a great books program. The sort of Matthew Arnold sort of approach of the best that's been thought and written and so forth, that's what you should read, not the garbage that I read in the Harvard Economics Department and many other places. We should have read the classics. We should have read good things. We should have read Marx and Keynes, for example, to take two names.
Or even Eric Hobsbawm.
Or even Eric Hobsbawm. Which brings me to a point that I want to mention. Ron raised Eric. Parentheses here. At the heart of the Marxist enterprise, of Marx's own enterprise, his own intellectual project, which has, of course, been remarkably misrepresented and inaccurately described ever since he was underway at it, is the notion of alienation. And that's an idea, it seems to me, that we need to keep in mind when we talk about these questions of education. As far as Marx was concerned, and he's drawing on the whole Enlightenment tradition of what it is to be human, which is, after all, what the Enlightenment was about, he's drawing on that Enlightenment tradition to say that the original sin of capitalist society is it calls upon, it makes it necessary for the vast majority of humankind to take what makes them human and sell it or rent it to somebody else. As far as Marx is concerned, what made you human was your work of head and hands. thinking, and Marx was no spiritualist. I mean, he's talking about embodied human beings. Your work of head and hands is what differentiates a human being from other species. Capitalism says, okay, what you do with your head and hands is not going to be up to you. It's going to be up to someone else. You have to go find someone who will pay you for your work of head and hands under their direction. You have to do what they want you to do, whether it's in a factory or an office or even teaching in a university. You have to do it their way in order to eat regularly. Now, that alienation is fundamental to capitalism. That's what makes it work. And Marx begins with the notion that that is profoundly wrong, that that is unhuman, inhuman. And indeed, that's what his vast intellectual enterprise of trying to figure out how capitalism worked and why it was that people were stolen from themselves, and that their being stolen from themselves was the necessary starting point for a political economy. And indeed, the only way to restore people to themselves is to overthrow that political economy. That seems to me just as right as it was when he wrote about it in the 1840s.
So to the person who's aimlessly going around their television dial or remote control and has stumbled upon this program, and what are these three guys talking about, and what are they saying, and who asks sincerely, well, what are people going to do when they don't work anymore? How is society going to function? How are people going to invent things and market things, and how is life going to get better if people don't work for other people and don't have the incentives to create, produce, innovate, work hard, all the stuff that we keep having pounded down our throats? Work, work, work. What do you say to this person watching this program?
Well, one thing you might do is respond as Karl Marx did. He wrote very little, of course, about a post-capitalist society, very, very little information, what he had in mind there. He spent his time trying to analyze how capitalism worked. But when he tried to think about a society which would be subsequent to capitalism, he lapsed into poetry. He said that under a post-capitalist society, one would be a hunter in the morning, a fisher in the afternoon, and a critical critic in the evening. That is, your work, your unalienated work brought back to yourself, is work that you want to do. And that, in that sense, people want to work. That's deep in Marx's notion is that the revolutionary worker is not a frustrated consumer, but a frustrated producer. That is, he wants to do things, and that's been taken away from him and given over to somebody else's control. Now, the problem with that is it becomes very hard to talk about that directly. That does become a matter of poetry, because most of the work that one is going to be doing, if one gets to do what one wants to do, is going to be poetic, whether it's building a boat or painting a house or planting a garden. A hunter in the morning, a fisher in the afternoon, and a critical critic in the evening.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about alienation maybe 20 or 30 years ago, after people seem to have rediscovered the economic and philosophical manuscripts of 1844. And it became overused in a sense. Indeed, we had someone recently retired from the philosophy faculty here who wrote a whole book about alienation. The conclusion was that people should stop using it because that term, because it had been used for so many different and contradictory things. But the problem quickly became, like so many other things, it became subjectivized and was supposedly about people's feelings and emotions. And alienation was not really meant to be that at all in the Marxist sense. But that's a big topic.
I used to use that word a lot, but I don't anymore because I just don't care anymore.
And with that exercise in alienation, we will remind you that you have been watching News from Neptune for October 12th in the 41st week of 2012. Our program is named in honor of Noam Chomsky, and this has been the White Bull edition, where we began and perhaps where we ended, celebrating the abduction of Europe by the American-dominated 1%. If our program interested you, you might want to look for similar programs here on Urbana Public Television, now streaming online. You can go to urbanapublictelevision.org and click on the live stream button and watch these programs on your computer. Beginning any moment you want to, but if you do that at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, you will see the David Pakman Show. At 8 a.m., you'll see a program called In Focus, the weekly documentary series from Deutsche Welle. And I'm actually going to get up on Saturday morning and watch this program because it worries me a bit, particularly since we have been talking about the abduction of Europe this evening. This week's program on Deutsche Welle, on In Focus as the program is called, is entitled Currency in Crisis, Chancellor Merkel's Struggle to Save the Euro. And I suppose that may be a description of what Chancellor Merkel is up to, but the description bothers me. It goes on. We interview politicians, bankers, fund managers, and taxpayers. Experts say the politicians have 3 months to find a comprehensive solution. That's not much time. Can Angela Merkel convince the other EU leaders to follow her course of government spending cuts? Our report shows that she'll have her work cut out, close quote. Now that sounds entirely too sympathetic to Ms. Merkel and the austerity programs that are coming forth from the German government. They're on to the right question. I'm not at all sure that they will suggest an accurate account of what the solution is. At 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, this program, News from Neptune, will be repeated on Urbana Public Television. And at 3 p.m., the Populist Dialogues. Sunday at 7:30 a.m., the White House Chronicle. 3:30 p.m., the Populist Dialogues again. And at 4 p.m., Labor's Worldview with our friends Dave Johnson and Jim Iman. Weekdays, Monday through Friday, here on Urbana Public Television, 7 a.m., Democracy Now!, 8 a.m., The Big Picture, and noon, The David Pakman Show. On Monday the 15th at 1 p.m., Labor's Worldview will be repeated. At 2 p.m., the Tom Hartman Program, which is a live 3-hour nationwide call-in show. And you can call in and talk to Tom. At 5 p.m., the European Journal. On Tuesday the 16th at 5 p.m., In Focus, Currency in Crisis, that Deutsche Welle program again that I'm leery of. At 7 p.m., European Journal. At 7:30 p.m., Alternatives to Incarceration, a CUCPJ, Champaign-Urbana...
Citizens for Peace and Justice.
Thank you. Town Hall Forum. And at 9:30 p.m., the White House Chronicle. And at 10 p.m., Aware on the Air, featuring Ron Szoke. I'm Carl Estabrook. My discussants tonight on News from Neptune have been David Green and Ron Szoke. This and other editions of the program can be seen on the website newsfromneptune.com and on Facebook. I can be reached at carl@newsfromneptune.com and on Facebook. I'm happy to receive your comments and let us know if you'd ever like to substitute for one of our regulars when they're not available. Our thanks to UPTV, especially Jake, Jason, and Caleb. Inshallah, we'll be back next week with a new edition of News from Neptune to remind you, in the words of Edward de Vere, what's past is prologue, what to come in yours and my discharge. In the meantime, confusion to our enemies, and a good night to you.